What is one thing that you passionately believe that many others don't believe? This week, let's look at 5 ways you can have better conversations. Now, maybe it's you're not comfortable approaching professionals and starting conversations with a complete stranger and networking that way. Or maybe it's a side where you've been in a situation where there's just awkward silences throughout a conversation. You don't know how to pivot the conversation. Well, let's look at some tactical ways you can improve those conversations. Number 1, begin incredibly humble. You know that one person who every conversation they enter into, they try to, as quick as possible, try to brag. Whether they try to brag about their job or their car or their recent vacation, etc. Instead, start that conversation in a humble way, trying to compliment the other person. Whether that be a skill they have that you wish you had that ability, you would love to learn how to do art like they do it, or how to use networking skills like they use. Compliment their skill set. And if you don't know their skill sets, compliment their energy. Perhaps they come across as a very positive and energetic individual. Maybe you can compliment on their confidence and their composure in such public spaces. Now, 2 things to stay away from. Don't compliment anything that's over-sexualized. Also, don't compliment something that you truly don't believe in. Find something that you can compliment them for. Number 2, Boomerang Stories. Now, obviously, in these conversations, people love stories. So tell stories about vacations or things that you've done. But make sure every story you tell, you try desperately to try to boomerang it back to them so they tell a story. And you can kind of ping pong back and forth that way. Do not be that person who just jumps from story to story to story of your own. And another skill set is make sure that when they finish their story, you do not immediately just jump into your own story. This is where you kind of build that reputation of the one-upper, that you always got to one-up that other person. Instead, when they finish their story, can you ask a couple follow-up questions? Things like, oh, that's amazing. I've always wished I could experience that. Tell me more. Or why did you choose that location specifically for your vacation? I'd love to hear about your research or your passion behind it. So make sure to ask a few follow-up questions before jumping into a story of your own. Number 3, don't get stuck in boring questions. Here's what I'm talking about, boring questions. Where are you from? What is your major? What do you do for a living? Now, obviously, those can be great starting points. I'm not saying never ask those questions, but as soon as you ask that question, where are you from? Where do you live? What do you do for work? The immediate next question should be, why do you enjoy that? Why do you choose to live there? Right? Those kind of why questions dive deeper into passions, beliefs, values. Those are the things that impact conversation and make those conversations much deeper. Number 4, realize that there is no such thing as boring people. The issue is you haven't asked the right question yet. So, for example, we've all been in a situation where you may be having a conversation with someone and they're giving short answers. They're not leaning into the conversation. It's kind of pulling teeth to get that conversation moving forward. Sometimes we think, oh, it's that person's fault. It's because they're boring or they're uninteresting. And those are the issues. It's all on them. That's not the case. If you see that happening, ask yourself, have I not asked the right question yet? So have some interesting or creative questions in your back pocket that you can pull out in any conversation that can kind of serve as a reset to any conversation. And here are some examples. Right now, are you working on any passion projects, or are you thinking about starting any sort of passion project? What is one thing that you passionately believe that many others don't believe? And another one, let's go back to the previous question where you asked about what they did for a living and then you asked why, but the answer you got back was, oh, it's not a passion of mine. I just do it to pay the bills. Ask a question like, well, if you had $5 million right now, what would you do? And number 5, be a hype person when you're listening. Now, you think this video would just be about how you can communicate and the things you can say, but the majority of that conversation is going to be you listening. So how can you show up as an effective listener in those conversations? Use facial expressions to show that you care about what they're talking about. Laugh at things that sort of hype them up and keep them going on their stories, or nod your head. This actually, nodding your head 3 times actually scientifically increases the amount of time the other person speaks. Also paraphrase at the end or use the last few words of their sentence. Mirroring those last few words actually gets them in tune with you and continues to talk. So this is my question for you. In the comment of this video, let me know, what is one thing you try to do in new conversations? When you're talking to a brand new person, is there something, a question that you like to ask? Is something maybe a creative question? Or is there a feeling you like them to leave with after having that conversation? Let me know. Is there something you'd like to use from this video in your next conversation? Let me know in the comments below. Last week's video was about persuasion techniques that Disney World uses, and Adriana has the comment of the week. An organization like Disney can't afford not to put deep thought into their design and creations. With a place as popular as Disney World, where it's bound to be crowded, they have to psychologically train the crowds in order to keep structure or trick people into doing things without blatantly telling them. We'll see you next week.